All right, folks, so welcome in. My name's Devin Peters. I'm with Innovapptive. You might know us from your lanyards. Pleasure to see you all, be with you today. I'm excited to unpack Sabert's digital manufacturing journey with Glenn alongside me here. Glenn, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Glenn Simmonds. I'm the maintenance and reliability leader for Sabert. I've got about almost 30 years in industry, but I've been with Sabert about 2.5. You can tell, like, I'm the floor guy. The controls techs report to me, the maintenance leaders report to me, right? So I sit in corporate, but we're a relatively small company. I think we have about 2,700 employees total. So, like, the corporate maintenance and reliability guy goes and gets dirty in the lube room. So that kind of gives you a feel for where we are.
So Glenn, when we were talking before the session today, I know you had mentioned the vest, but there is an extra caveat.
Yeah,
so
yes.
I've got to ask, what's going on with it? What's
yeah? So there's two pieces to this, right? So first off, as a manager, I have to model the behavior that I expect, right? Mm-hmm. So our corporate operations thing is red shirts on Wednesday to remind us of safety. So I got my red Sabert shirt on. But somebody yesterday talked about, that you're getting buy-in when your employees are happy and engaged in doing stuff. And I wish I could take credit for this vest, but one of our plants, after we deployed the work order solution, they ran for about 6 weeks and they finally got into the groove and they got really excited about it. And they wanted to have the operators start following the process that we rolled out to maintenance and write notifications correctly, but none of them knew how to do it. So they put a QR code on the back of this vest and they put work instructions online so any operator with their phone could scan the work instructions to create a notification. So it says, stop if you need maintenance, enter a notification. And the mechanics wanted to wear these. So I was like, okay, now we're at happy. Right. So that was like, I couldn't have planned that, and thank God I didn't try.
Yeah. No, I loved having a discussion with you about that because, we're going to talk a lot about the systems and the process and the organization of a digital transformation project, but that element right there is really what's happening on the floor, right? The folks are responding to the change that you're implementing. They're getting excited about it, and that's a practical use case out on the floor for, hey, I have an issue, I need work instructions for submitting a notification for maintenance, and it's incredibly practical, so glad we were able to showcase that today. So with that, we'll jump into, just introduction to Sabert. I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the mission. So
folks wanted to know what, folks ask, right? What does your company do? We are a food packaging company, right? Our slogan is we make food look great. We do thermoform plastic, we do paper products, and we also do pulp, compostable, recyclable food packaging containers, both through direct to customer, but also we do a lot of private branded and private labeled stuff. So most of you have interacted with our products probably in the last few days. Some of you this morning, because I see you using some of our products. I can see them from here. So I know that you're using our products on a daily basis.
Awesome.
Right. But I had no idea this company existed 2.5 years ago. I never thought about where the food package comes from. I was growing corn seed at the time, and it was a very different world to walk into.
Awesome. And the reason I'm up here today, Innovapptive specializes in connected worker applications. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but really the partnership between Innovapptive and Sabert is centered around our maintenance work order application. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit and how we enhance the frontline worker for navigating SAP or really any CMMS in which you're doing maintenance work. So as a solution engineer here to talk a little bit about that on our end. So starting off, looking at the actual process for the digital transformation journey here.
Yeah, so you've seen a lot of really beautiful strategy charts. Yeah, we don't have one of those yet. We're about 2 years in. The connected worker stuff we were doing in maintenance was really our first deep run. Like we had some plant controls engineers that have been connecting instrumentation and building some SCADAs and stuff prior to that, but we don't have that holistic picture. But what we do have is, if you kind of look at the two outer pieces, right, that's the IT/OT integration piece, right? We run our OEE is all instrumented and run into the central system. It's all centrally managed and controlled. And we've been able to tap some of that data to do, more discrete run rate displays on the floor. So, hour by hour boards and minute by minute boards, things like that on the floor. And on the opposite end of that, because some of the equipment is connected, the mechanics can do things like monitor the air compressors from the shop, right? So we do have some some implementations like that. Some of them with commercial solutions, some of them we grew in-house, right? So our plants aren't even all on the same system yet. Like we are still trying to figure out which one works best. I think it was the set up the pilots and then we'll figure out which one works and the one we're going to roll out. Yeah, we're running pilots right now. But we do have, like this one in the middle where the guys actually take detailed measurements on some trimming machines, and they got to make sure the gaps are all set correctly. And that's now all digitized, and we've instrumented it out so we can monitor live as the machine's running, and we can see the roll tension to make sure that we're getting proper sheet quality. But in the middle of that, right, so those are kind of like the tools on the edge, but in the middle, we quickly realized that if we didn't set our people up, we were going to have a problem. So we had no visibility to any of I'm going to talk to maintenance. We had no visibility to any maintenance metric. When I came into the company, the owner asked me to tell him what the maintenance costs were for the organization, and it took me 10 days to dig down a maintenance cost report. I couldn't believe it. Because, I came from a big company and I could run a transaction in SAP and see the maintenance cost. I had no visibility. So we very quickly realized we're going to have to fix that problem, because if I can't report basics like cost and uptime and, maintenance related downtime, I was in trouble. So we started working on that, and we've actually managed to build out a really powerful Power BI desktop that has a lot of that. But the mechanics weren't putting data into SAP, right? Which is where we ended up having to go look at, okay, how do we fix the leaky data bucket? Because they were doing things on kiosks. Well, the kiosks were in the maintenance shop, and they go do 7 jobs before they ever go back to the maintenance shop. And by the time they get back there at the end of the day, all the data leaked all over the floor, and they don't put anything into the kiosk, right? So we said, we got to fix this problem, because I don't have any maintenance costs, because nobody charges any time and nobody buys any of the parts out of the stores, right? So my choice was to put all the stores behind glass cases or give them something that they could actually do with. So that's kind of how we ended up in this structure and kind of where we are. Like we're still we haven't even deployed the mobile to all of our plants yet, because they're not ready. They don't have some of the other things ready to go. And I think that's on the next chart.
Yeah, sure. So Glenn, quick question here. Is it fair to say that you started with an overarching objective here, right? The operational agility and the digital technology integration, and through that process, there was a realization at some point that the foundational data from our frontline workers wasn't getting captured, and that was negatively impacting the objective?
Well, I think we knew that up front, right?
Yeah.
Part of the interview for me was they were looking for somebody that had actually used SAP PM, because in the interview, the CEO said, "Can you make SAP PM work?" Sure, right? It does work. It's just not friendly, right? It actually is a very powerful and robust system. But we very quickly realized that if we were going to make this work with the operators, we had to do some process work, and we needed to fix the front end, right? So that's kind of why we went down this road. I think it was my second week we started down this road, because we figured it out really quick. Actually, I think the organization already knew, which is why they were looking to put a team in place to deal with it.
Gotcha. Well, I have some colleagues that are going to be disappointed to find out that purchasing a connected worker platform doesn't solve all the problems. But I will take that it is a foundational element of the journey.
Yes. Yeah. So this is actually how we did it, right? So you can see the connected worker project we're implementing the mobile was actually the fourth work stream in this project, right? It was intentionally at the bottom. The very first thing we started doing was retraining the team on the basic performance expectations. When we started, we were getting about 22% of our time charged and about half of the parts, right? So, and we knew it was only half the parts because we were cycle counting. So our stores people were doing their job, and so the inventory was accurate, but the number of adjustments every month in the cycle count was off the charts. I wish I could tell you that was completely fixed. It is not. We're still working on it. But we started retraining those expectations and rolling out the new visualizations so that supervisors had tools to ensure that their people were doing it. At the same time, we did not have a formalized work management process. So if you know anything about maintenance and reliability, like we write books on this stuff. Like it's not a secret what the maintenance work process should be. It's in a book. Like all you got to go do is read it and do it. Yeah, they weren't doing it. So we had to define it. We had to set it up. We had to create it. We also found out very quickly that about 30% of our inventory in stores didn't have a part number. So we started 5S'ing and setting up parts. So when I joined Sabert, we had 22,000 materials in our MRO library. We now have 49,500 SKUs in our library in the last 2 years. And that was all manually done at the plants. We didn't bring in a partner to do that. It was stores, clerks, and buyers crawling on the shelves, part by part. They hate me for it, but they're happy because now they can see what they're buying. And then we started with our tool, right? The SAP tool that we had was configured for reactive maintenance. There were no PMs set up. Most of the equipment wasn't even set up in the system. We didn't have an asset register. So we started data sprints and we started line walking and we started putting barcodes on machines. I mean, it took us 2 years to get this far. So, right, this is a lot of work when you start looking at this. We have 9 production plants, so we're trying to do this across 9 plants concurrently.
So Glenn, in terms of the system deployment, right? I know we started with people in process. I love that approach to the project. Where in that journey was it decided on, like what mobile applications we're going to go with, or was the initial thought we've got to cleanse the data, we've got to focus on those foundational pieces first, and then get to the systems?
No, we did them concurrently. So I think folks. So the leadership above me had been sold on connected worker in theory prior to me joining the organization. So I hired in and I showed up on my first day. I hadn't even moved because I was still living in Iowa and we're based in New Jersey. And I get on the phone Monday morning with my new boss and she says, oh, by the way, they're doing a proof of concept next week in California on a mobile maintenance platform. You need to be there. Okay, so they had already made a decision, but they had none of the foundational elements. So it ended up, part of the process of selecting our platform was who also has a work process that's reasonably well standardized, that when I have to tell the people in the plant an uncomfortable message of you need to change something, I can blame them. and I did a lot of blaming them. Even though it was the process in the book and it was the one that we were writing, sorry, we're the scapegoat.
Again, one thing we talked about, the end goal is to empower the frontline worker and make sure everyone is bought into this change.
Yeah,
so if we have to be the scapegoat for that, that's perfect.
Well, and that's the value of a good partnership, right? They haven't taken it personal, right, on why we're doing this. Yeah. But we actually, it was driving our project leader nuts because we were changing configuration in our SAP system at the same time we were having scoping and design meetings on their tool. And they would say well, how does it work? And I said, well, it works like this today, but next week when the configuration promotes from the dev to the quality environment, it will start to work like this. And they were like, really? Would you stop doing that? I mean, we made changes in our production environment. up until about 6 weeks before the first mobile deployment.
But critical to have the ability to do so.
Yeah.
Absolutely, right? Being able to configure the work process through this change rather,
Yep.
configure the tool as it meets up and coming needs
Yeah.
that you can't foresee. You and I talked about hiring or partnering with expertise in support through these projects. That really resonated with me in our earlier discussions. One thing we had talked about too was your support through this. I mean, you've made a career out of digital transformation and project deployments, and so having someone that is a champion at the very top as a product owner, and not to toot your own horn, but I guess how did you see yourself as an instrumental piece in this?
So I did my first attempt at a mobile application deployment in 2004. I rolled out Lubit for lubrication technicians. And for those of you who know the instruments, I had an ECOM unit. It was an old Windows unit. The thing was the size of a brick, and it had a screen that was about this big. And so, of course, my 55-year-old lubrication technician loved it because it was so easy to read. But we were a Class 1 Div 1 house, right? So it had to be completely sealed and contained. That implementation lasted about 19 months. I left at month 12, and it hung on for 6 or 7 months after I left, and then they went back to their notebooks. And I've done a bunch of SAP work along the way in my career. So I learned early in those processes that if we didn't put a really solid change management process in place, we were toast. We actually also used the Cotter model. So it was interesting that the last speaker put that up here, because that is the same model that we use to drive through our change process. And we started that even while we were still designing the tool. We took notes from the meetings, and we made flyers, and we sent them out to the plants. We made sure all the plants saw pictures of what the design team was doing, and we brought a member of every plant into the design conference room, and it drove the vendor nuts because we were arguing with each other, not with them. If I had had a little bit more time, I would have put all of us in the room first. And we would have done our arguing before the vendor got into the room with us. But it was nice to have the partner to say, yeah, we understand what you're saying. Here's where the boundaries are. Here's what we can do. Here's what we can't. And it helped us make some decisions.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm sure that drove kind of that people process first, the
Yep.
change management approach from the highest level for
Yep.
this journey. To switch gears just a little bit, one thing I've noticed throughout my career in working with these projects is that there are always going to be silos, right? There's going to be folks that are isolated from the why of certain swim lanes, or they don't understand where the change is coming from or what's driving it. And with all these pieces moving, that's no question that's going to happen. But I was curious as to how you facilitated, breaking down those barriers. How did you set up, recurring meetings or teams to promote communication? How did you make sure folks were aware throughout the journey of what was happening?
Yeah, so we identified a key user at every plant, and we started, the very first thing we started doing with those key users is we started teaching them SAP. Like, none of them knew how SAP worked. They didn't understand the methodology. They didn't even understand all the terminology. So that team met every 2 weeks, and I would train them on a different element of master data, and then they would have a sprint of work to do at their plant. And then 2 weeks later, we would have another training session, and they would have another sprint. So I mean, we didn't even have maintenance work centers set up in SAP. So they all had to learn what a work center is and how to evaluate the capacity of their team and decide, are you going to put all your people in one crew, or are you going to put them in multiple crews? Like, they had to go back and have that conversation with their plant. And we did that for about 8 months while we were going through this design process of just teaching raw data. At the same time, every month we had all the maintenance managers together every month, and we did similar activities with them. We trained them on the metrics, we trained them on the vision, we trained them on the higher level roadmap, because we did build out a machine reliability roadmap for the organization. connected worker was a piece of that roadmap. And so we taught them what we were doing in the CMMS, in standard operating procedures, in hiring diagrams. Like, I mean, we're still writing role descriptions because we just identified a new role that we need in our plants. And so I was talking back and forth with my team earlier this week, and I apologize to the speakers who saw me over here typing, because we're trying to hire some new roles and we had to write job descriptions because they didn't exist in our library. Right? So we're still doing that kind of work kind of as we go.
Yeah, so really the unglamorous part of it, as it were, the work that needs to be done but so critical for the success of the project. Well, I mean, let's take a look at what the results look like. Like, what is the outcome of that effort, and what did we actually see on the back end with regards to maintenance reliability?
Yeah, so we tried a couple of different metrics, and so the one that we ended up choosing was where notifications come from, right? Or where work orders come from, right? Like I said, when we started, everything was a reactive work order. They were all created after the fact. All of our SAP customized screens were all designed to create a work order, charge time, buy parts, close it. All at the kiosk, all after the fact. So we had no reliability data at all, right? SAP stores reliability data in notifications. The technician never saw the notification. Nobody even knew what a notification was. And so we said our metric was going to be how many work orders came from a notification as part of the mobile, because that was the new work process we were going to teach. And we said, okay, we want every work order originating from a notification, so at least we have the opportunity to capture reliability data, right? We are now moving on to how many failure codes are put in the notification. We're still working on that because it's pretty bad, right? Our number one category is blank, not other. That's the number two category, right? Other is the number two category for symptoms for why somebody called maintenance, right? Number one category is blank. So we said we're going to look at where do work orders come from. So when we first started, our first deployment was in May of 2023. And you can kind of see that little gold bar of how many notifications that we had, or how many work orders came from notifications. And then as we deployed our plants, you can kind of see that we slowly but surely, steadily moved our way across. We've done 7 of the 9 plants, and what I wanted to show here is the 37% is mostly the remaining 2 plants. They're relatively large and they write a lot of work orders, but what's more important is the stability in the notification numbers coming from, or the work orders coming from notifications. The other thing you notice is that light blue bar has slowly started to grow. We've started creating maintenance plans and automated triggering work orders, right? So the work orders are generated now in the system and they show up on the technician's tablet without anybody doing anything. It seems so simple and foundational because I came from a Fortune 100 company. Like we took this for granted that that's the way SAP worked. The folks in Sabert had never seen SAP function like this before. So we're now working this road, and we do have one of those pilot proof of concepts. One of our plants actually now has their PMs triggered off of run cycles coming from the instrumentation. So every 1.25 million cycles of a machine, we take it down to do the PMs on it. So we have instrumented that machine up and it's live and running in that. I won't call it a lighthouse because they have some other stuff that I don't want everybody else copying, but I will say that part of what they're doing, we want them to copy. Because this was a large maintenance project, right? We're retraining our mechanics. We're doing intentional PMs. We brought in vendors to train on our machines. We've been putting new tools in their hands, right? We were measuring MRO spend and availability loss due to machine downtime. So the connected worker platform doesn't get credit for all of the OEE gains. But we've seen a 50% reduction in unscheduled maintenance downtime for our organization.
And that's huge.
In the last 2 years. Now, I wish I could take credit for all of it. We've also run a concurrent 5S and some other work, but it's part of that whole package.
I think one thing to take from this, and what really resonated with me, obviously the metric is so simple, but I think the lesson is something that can apply to any project. You've got a key metric that does multiple things, right? It tracks adoption of the new work process. So the growing of work orders that are coming from notifications rather than created directly, which was a key metric of the project. So you're tracking success and adoption, right? Are people actually using the new system with this new work process? So you're knocking out multiple avenues there. And on that third tier, you're also holding the project team accountable. As you mentioned, right, you have 37% in blue there. Ideally, we're getting that closer to
the blue should be zero. The dark blue should be zero.
Dark blue should be zero, and so that holds the program team accountable for we still have sites to deploy. So you're getting 3 different areas that are impacting the project with a very simple metric. And then also we're starting to see the next wave of change, which is implementing that PM program. So that was just a very, very elegant way, I think, to track the impact of the program, and one thing that really stuck with me there. Right. So I think as we're coming to a close here, anything to add, Glenn, on the kind of the final notes before we turn over to questions?
Unless there are questions. Like, I'm going to do way better on questions than I am on lecturing.
So the question is commenting on technology you use to accumulate and the technology you use to visualize all of those things in the back end.
So I'm maintenance, and so I have absolutely no problem in redeploying somebody else's stuff. I'm using the WM Wi-Fi system. Like, I'm stealing bandwidth off of the warehouse guys to run my connected worker platform.
How does that go over?
I haven't broken their system yet, so they don't care. When I break their system because I'm running too much data across it, then they're going to give me a hard time. So I was looking at some of the Wi-Fi and private LTE solutions while I was here, because I know I need to get that stuff off of their network, right? And it also leaves me dead spots. Like, if I get out into my compressor room, the connected worker doesn't work because there's no signal in there. Right, so the guys have to download everything to the tablet before they go in and do their work. So, like, we've made some workarounds, and we're still trying to figure that piece of it out. The sensors, we're getting better at what we're doing. We actually have a capital project in 2025 to put line routers in for all of our production lines. We have a few plants that had jumped pretty far ahead and had done that kind of networking structure. But I think next year's project plan is to put in, I think it's 65 line routers plus all the networking hardware to support it. So, I mean, when we talk about being at the beginning, like, yeah, I'm there. Like, I'm at the very beginning of doing that. We have 2 guys that basically are working on the instrumentation, and we're doing the what's possible game. I'm a reliability engineer, so we started with an FMEA. We didn't start with buying sensors. We had plants that were buying sensors, and I said, no. Let's go do the FMEA, because I want to know what failure modes. I've been doing this close to 30 years, and this is the 3rd FMEA I've done in my career. Because FMEA is a heavy tool, and it's not necessarily particularly valuable in most cases. You can get away with 5 whys for like 90% of the stuff you need to do. So when I decided... Can you
just take 30 seconds for folks who aren't familiar with
FMEA is a failure mode and effect analysis. Like, I wanted to understand the failure modes of all the different machines, and then we were going to figure out which ones we could cost effectively instrument and detect, and whether it was worth it, based on failure frequency and things like that. It's a very intense process, and so I don't like to do them because I'm going to take the easy route to do it.
So, and I do want to keep us on time. So this is great, and I did joke around a little bit about the vest and the glasses. However, it's a very good point, and I'm glad you brought it up. If the leadership doesn't model a pattern of behavior that you expect of others. The first plant I ran, the owner's spouse refused to wear safety glasses, and became one of these. I'm going to have to quit because I can't go yell at somebody for not wearing safety glasses in a foundry. So I like to say all failures are failures of leadership. If you're not demonstrating a pattern of behavior, don't expect anybody else to follow it. That's just that's a table stakes thing. So it's great to see that you demonstrate it continuously.
None of my people are here, so you're doing it right when you're doing it when nobody else is watching and nobody else knows.
Yeah, that's who you are. Who you
and
really are.
That's exactly what I want out of my mechanics. Right?
Great. So thanks very much. This is a great discussion.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it.